Okay, hello guys. We are back with another episode of Creepy Americana, and I am here with two very special guests, Seth and Lauren. They've been on the podcast before, so you may remember that was the cults episode.
And also the aliens with my weirdo dad.
Oh, that's right. The aliens too, yeah.
Faithful listeners, the cult apologist is back.
Remember him?
And I'm also the one who likes to scream and run away screaming when anything even remotely cult-like or totalitarian shows up. Hence, my recent freakouts on social media about Trump and his request for military parade, but that's another story.
Yes, that is a whole situation. So Seth and Lauren just got married. If you remember last episode, I think it was a little bit before their wedding. So they are married and they went on their honeymoon, and so they got inspired to do an episode with me about kind of the spooky South, especially because
we went to New Orleans.
Exactly. So
the mother of all spooky southern cities.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what it is. So if you guys have any specific stories or any experiences that you...
Now, I always forget how to pronounce her name, Madame...
Lalaurie.
You may remember her as a character on the Coven season of American Horror Story, and she was much worse in real life.
Yeah.
Yes.
We took a ghost tour, which are usually hilarious, and we got to see the house where it all went down. And when I got close to the house, I was just overcome by like a sense of vertigo, and like my vision kind of swam for a moment. I don't know how much of it was just in my head that I'd just been listening to all these terrible stories of all the horrible things this woman had done, or it's just so much bad vibes coming out of the place, because the place, even when I wasn't told what it was yet, it's just like, that doesn't look right.
That's a spooky house.
So
Yep.
It's a giant gray mansion that pretty much takes up its own block in the heart of the French Quarter. And people, for some reason, like to talk about how beautiful it allegedly is, despite all the horrors that went on there. Like, that's a common feature I've noticed in spooky southern scenes. Like, oh, by the way, isn't that place so beautiful? And on the outside, anyway, it's not beautiful at all. There is something wrong with it. It gives you
bleak.
a vibe. Yeah.
And unhomely.
Yes.
Have I talked to you guys about that? You know what that means?
No.
No.
In German, it's unheimlich, which is actually something that Freud came up with.
Okay.
But it's this concept of something that is not comfortable for whatever reason. A lot of times it has to do with architecture. Mm-hmm. So if there's anything that's kind of unusual, or like a weird color, or just like the architecture is not symmetrical, it can feel really uncomfortable.
And one thing that sticks out about this house, besides the gray color, which makes it look unusually bleak, is the fact that it's all closed off, and on the inside there's like a courtyard. And it kind of makes sense because she became infamous for hiding or covering up a lot of the horrible things that she did. And a lot of places in the French Quarter are a lot more open. You see a lot more big windows, a lot of wrought iron balconies and stairways, but this place is all like its own little compound. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Actually, I think it's interesting that you said also that people are like, oh, it's so beautiful.
On the inside, anyway.
On the inside,
Yeah.
but all the horrors, blah, blah, blah. I think that's kind of interesting because she had a similar situation where she was like this socialite who was like throwing parties, and she had this really great social life. But then, when people found out about what she was doing, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, she's so evil, even though she's like this beautiful socialite throwing all these parties.
Yeah, the whole story is just mind-blowing in a really terrible way. How she kept all these people tortured and hidden, and things were so bad that her fellow slave owners were like, no, you were a terrible person.
Yeah, because what it was, in New Orleans, they had actual laws of how you could treat...
Because it was French.
Yes.
They called it Code Noir. Code Noir.
Yeah, it's like they even had days off. I mean, it doesn't excuse any of it, but it's like that right there is so drastically different from the situation in the rest of the South.
Yeah, at the very least, they had minimal legal protections.
Yeah, exactly. And she violated every last one of them. I'd say the worst part of the story was like the girl that she kept in the attic where all of the tortures happened. Like what she did when she was finally released, which was like she broke out of the attic and jumped into the middle of the courtyard.
She committed suicide.
Yeah, from the upper balcony.
When she escaped.
upper balcony during the middle of a giant big party that she was throwing. And that, yeah.
Now, if I remember correctly, Valerie, she escaped.
Yes.
Yeah.
She did not get punished.
Yeah, she and her daughters
Supposedly-
fled New Orleans, and nobody is certain where they ended up, though they could be anywhere. Though they probably went to some other French-speaking
I was
area.
about to say they probably,
Right.
went back to France maybe or something like that. I'm not totally sure, but
That was the assumption, and there are some stories of her being spotted in France.
it's so hard to tell because of the time period.
Oh, yeah.
So,
It was much easier to just run away and start over.
And other interesting things we learned about New Orleans during our walking tours of it was a lot of the houses in the historic district, they have second stories and balconies, and the balconies are rather low, and it is possible to get up to the second balcony without too much effort. So what they do is that they have put broken shards of glass directly onto the ledges of the balcony.
And people have done that to their fences, too. They have their own, like, little courtyard.
Yes.
oh wow.
And it's a deterrent for people trespassing.
somewhat of a deterrent.
And what's kind of funny about that is how that is still very much a thing there.
It's apparently still legal.
But carrying around any sort of glass bottle is very much illegal.
So you can drink on the streets, but you just can't drink out of a
Glass.
bottle.
Correct. It has to be plastic.
Interesting. Or
And in a
aluminum.
weird way, it makes
Yeah.
sense because it's less hazardous to, like, step on a plastic cup.
No, like
than-
if you're so drunk, you're like leaving things on the ground or you're falling over or whatever. You're not like breaking glass.
But it's still interesting to see, like, both sides of the legal coin on glass as a weapon. You know, glass as a weapon against intruders versus
Yeah.
glass on the street.
Because that to me was like what jumped to mind. It's like, well, like an irate drunk person could throw that, bust someone's face open, or use it as a
Yeah.
club. And also, I learned that apparently New Orleans decriminalized marijuana like 7 years ago, and because
I had no idea.
You could
Yeah.
not walk anywhere without smelling weed.
yeah, it was.
So it's like legal in like the recreational sense.
if you get arrested, it's just a fine, and it seems that
Oh,
the French-
kind of like New York City or whatever.
yeah, and
Okay.
it seems that the French Quarter at night, the cops don't really care as long as they don't see you dealing.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we didn't really see anybody smoking, but we could
Well, I
definitely
did.
smell it.
Yeah, I saw some people living out on the streets just rolling one up. And it really is, it's a remarkable city, and it appeals to me as someone who spent a lot of their late teens and early 20s obsessed with Southern Gothic literature, like, because this is the...
Mecca?
Yes.
Though nothing is more Southern Gothic than their cemetery system.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot to say there as well because of the water table and being completely below sea level.
New Orleans was built on a place that is not fit for the living or the dead. That should always be remembered.
It's a beautiful city, but an estuary. It's,
Yeah, it's
you know,
built in a bowl.
it is-
Surrounded
it is.
by Lake Pontchartrain, the Mississippi River, and the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep.
So, when you guys were going in there, did you guys see the Ninth Ward and all that sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
stuff?
Yeah,
How's
we
it
took a
looking?
bus tour, and our tour guide, who is a native of the area, some of our other tour guides were people who had moved to New Orleans but had been there for several years, but this lady was like born and raised, had been in New Orleans her entire life, and had the accent to prove it. She went into great detail about the post-Katrina building codes, like if so much of your house was destroyed, you were able to rebuild, but at a certain amount above sea level. If your house was completely destroyed, you had to build way above everybody else, so you saw this weird mismatch in architecture. You know, like some places on one street would just have this, what was it? It was like 4 or 6 feet, like underneath them.
Yep.
And the ones that were completely wiped out, you could tell because they're now on stilts.
Yep.
Oh wow.
Like they were built right on the beach.
That's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, not crazy in the sense of like it's a bad thing necessarily, but
That's just how they have to do it now.
And
I mean they have to because a lot of people can't afford to like rebuild their houses entirely. So if you had enough of your house to like just repair it, of course you're gonna do that. So like why would you completely rebuild? I mean, then there's so many people who just never came back in the first place.
yeah, I remember a lot of people from New Orleans went all the way down to where I'm from originally, West Palm Beach, Florida. Like there was just a massive influx of Louisiana plates, and that's a long ass drive.
Yeah.
there
And
were-
I don't think a lot of those people ever went back.
Yeah, I remember Katrina happened my junior year of high school, and during my
Sorry.
Yes, I know, I'm an old man, and during my senior year, there were easily like 20 new students who had just recently come in from New Orleans.
I only knew one person who came in from New Orleans. That was back in middle school.
Yeah, I was in middle school too. Again, Seth is the old man here.
Yes, I'm from the before time.
Before the internet.
Yes.
Yeah, he was born a different decade than us. How about that?
Yes.
Yeah, I personally didn't know anybody who was from New Orleans who had evacuated, but I did know a couple people, including a couple of teachers of mine who had family who had been affected, and you know, they personally were acquainted with people who had made, again, the really long trek.
No, I don't have family that's from New Orleans, but I have family that lives pretty close because my family lives in Mississippi. And yeah, it's like my aunt and my grandmother, you know, went without power for like a couple weeks, and things got real rough at the supermarkets for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And even like a year after, they had trees down and stuff still.
To me, the most depressing post-Katrina thing I saw was this one museum exhibit we saw that was all about Katrina. It was like basically the entire first floor of one of the museums in Jackson Square.
Yeah, it was built to resemble an attic. Like, much larger, of course, but that was like what was it invoking.
And what a lot of people were doing at the time is that they were hiding in their attic because they're...
What else were you going to do?
Yep.
Yeah, and the particular piece of that exhibit that really got me was the fact that they were told to keep axes in their attics to help themselves get out and climb onto their roofs if necessary. And a lot of people died trapped in their attics because they couldn't get out.
Yeah, that's fucking awful.
Fucking depressing.
And there's still so many people that are missing still, like have never actually been recovered.
I mean, essentially, New Orleans has lived through its own horror story.
And the less you say about the Superdome, the better.
Oh yeah, no, people don't want to go near it for the most part. Like people who, no, because there was...
I've only ever seen the outside of it, but we steered clear from it.
That's where they have the Essence Festival.
Yes, yeah.
And Kayla likes her and her family go to that concert stuff. And it's a pretty big deal in the black community because of all the artists and stuff. But I think there's still like a lot of people who...
Yeah, would prefer it not be there.
Yeah. I think so. But why don't you talk a little bit about the Southern Gothic-ness, because you grew up in South Georgia, and that's pretty much the entire area is Gothic.
Yes.
Your family's life story is Southern Gothic. Like, you should write a novel and just change everybody's names.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I won't go too deeply into that, just to spare them. It is a genre that used to captivate me pretty hardcore. I feel sometimes I need to start getting back into it. And actually, during the last part of my high school career, I wanted to go to Tulane in New Orleans. I actually got accepted. Katrina hits.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So I go to another town that is very much associated with Southern Gothic due to one of its most famous residents, and that's Milledgeville, Georgia. It's a small town about 30 miles northeast of Macon, Georgia, and it was home to Flannery O'Connor, who's one of the more prominent writers in the Southern Gothic tradition. I believe she died in the mid-60s of lupus at a young age, but she had already won the National Book Award for her novel Wise Blood. And she wrote 2 novels, about 30 short stories. All of them, usually critics of hers kind of downplay her as just like she's just a moralist, but she to me gets to the heart of the South. She uses a phrase called the Christ-haunted South. She was very much a faithful Catholic, but through her writings, she just jabs a finger in the eye of hypocritical Southern Christians. And then also, she no one is spared from just like her pointing out hypocrisy. And
I have very little personal experience with the literary genre, but I have seen a lot of the real life equivalent, again, not just with what I know about my in-laws, but just a lot of families of people I went to elementary, middle school with, because as I may have mentioned before, I went to a teeny tiny Baptist and everything but name Christian school, and a lot of what I saw there, it was people desperately trying to cover things up, and I think that's a huge hallmark of that.
Yeah, you find that a lot in Faulkner. Yeah, that pops up a lot in his stories of just like,
and a lot of hiding behind Jesus,
yeah.
so that ties into the whole Christ-haunted deal.
That's such a good term.
Christ Haunted
Haunted,
South, yeah.
I love that. So, have you ever been to Savannah?
I have.
Yes, once, but it was the Hilton Head region, which is a little bit north of Savannah. I've never been
in the that's like across the border in South Carolina, right?
Yes, it's like it all kind of like blends in together. If I recall correctly,
but
Savannah,
it's like technically right across the border. Okay.
And I have known people from Savannah, and that is another like very much it's old South,
yes,
which means it sucks to be black there.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you something about growing up in the South. Everyone will pretend everything is peachy keen when the most horrible shit happens on a daily basis, and they will make the biggest deals out of the most minor stuff.
Mountain out of a molehill.
Yes, while just completely sweeping away all of the tragedies, all of the crimes being committed.
Sounds like personal experience.
Yes.
Again, my personal experience is really tied to that, and a lot of it is the women covering things up for the men who royally fuck up.
Yeah,
that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Men just forget about it, women cover it up for them. That's usually the gender roles in the South.
Yeah, and the women like take that inside themselves and shove it down, and it shrinks them until they die.
And that's also tied into this whole women are all like, oh yeah, so-and-so did this terrible thing, but we'll support you. But it's like, let's not actually take any action against the perpetrator of whatever horrible thing.
Yeah, it's like Roy Moore.
But where were we? Oh yes, Milledgeville. So was there any like particular haunted house or anything in Milledgeville that was famous?
Yeah, Milledgeville is famous primarily for, and this is at least in Georgia, I've never encountered anyone outside of Georgia who knows anything about this place, but for the old asylum there.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Milledgeville is currently home to one of the largest behavioral health hospitals in the state of Georgia, and that's Central State Hospital.
Is that currently active?
Oh yeah, that's the big one. But this hospital's precursor is legendary, especially among college kids in Middle Georgia, as the place to go for what I call legend tripping. And this is a term I encountered on the internet back in the late 90s, and I have never heard anyone actually use.
Okay, it's basically urban exploration, but it's like you're literally saying going on a trip to find like urban legends.
Yes, it's like, oh, this place is haunted, let's go visit that place. Yes.
It's pretty much it's the same thing, it's just by a different name.
Exactly.
But I like that. Legend tripping.
Yes.
So did you ever go?
I went outside because I peeked my head inside, and there's like a fallen down staircase, and the place is like a nightmare looking in. Not even if you're not like assigning anything supernatural or even the possibility that anyone's living in there.
But in terms of structure.
Yeah, it's like, no one should be coming near this.
Like you're gonna like fall down into the basement and like break your ass.
Exactly.
Don't do that.
However, there is a much safer building, the old Governor's Mansion, which is within walking distance of the campus for Georgia College, which is in Milledgeville, and my old alma mater. And the history department at Georgia College is rather big, and since the old Governor's Mansion is so close, they've turned it into a pretty large museum that a lot of the older history majors and the graduate students usually work there just to get some experience, and one of the few practical things you can do besides being a professor. The other one's becoming a lawyer. I should have done that. I would often go through the campus at night because back then I had horrible insomnia, and roving around an old southern town in the middle of the night when you've gotten about maybe 4 hours of sleep in the last 3 days is not advisable under any circumstances, especially once you start hearing stories of strange events happening in these old buildings, because it doesn't matter if anything actually happens, things are going to happen to you.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, because it's like, that's the way the mind works. It likes to fuck with you. So maybe you see a ghost, maybe not.
But you think you did.
Exactly.
I mean, it's kind of, sorry to go on a little bit of a tangent, but it's a bit like alien abduction in the sense that people adamantly do believe that they've had these experiences.
Yes, exactly.
Whether or not that's the thing they actually experience, they certainly do believe it.
Yep.
So the human brain is a tricky little bitch.
Oh yeah. And during my wanderings around campus, completely unassisted in this instant on any substances, I'm I'm going by the old governor's mansion, heading on to the 24-hour library, because, this was the mid-2000s. No computer for me. Wasn't carrying one around in my pocket just yet. And I look up at the old governor's mansion, and just suddenly a light pops on in the upper floor. I was like, that's interesting. And I just, kind of stand there for a little bit, waiting for someone to walk by. It's a little bit late for any of the students or caretakers to be there. And as it goes off, it's like, okay, just maybe someone coming in, one last peek around, and then it goes on again. And it goes off. And then it goes on. And then it goes off. And I'm just standing there.
Was it doing a weird signaling type pattern, how lighthouses do?
No, it was it wasn't even like that.
It wasn't steady.
Yeah, exactly. Anything. It would stay on, go off, stay on for just a little bit, go off. And I'm just standing there. It's either someone is screwing with me right now, or the stories are true.
They were asking you for help, Seth.
Yes,
it's we see you on the street.
Yes, free us from this ancient prison.
I think college campuses are very rife with ghost stories.
Did you ever take the FSU ghost tour?
I did not, but damn, I wish I had. I didn't even know that was a real thing.
I feel like I'm the one person I know who took it during orientation.
So, man, if I had known about that, fuck, I sure would have done it. So, what are the stories on that? Because I want to know.
I don't remember all of them, but the two I remember most vividly involve the honors dormitory, Landis Hall, and the 24-hour library. I'm sensing a theme here with 24-hour libraries being featured.
Yeah.
They're fun places.
Beacons for ghosts.
Which is directly across this
big
nice
open green
field. And the story that we were told is the reason why there is steam randomly popping up from vents on the green is because...
Tunnels.
Yeah, allegedly those tunnels used to be fully operational steam tunnels, and at certain times of night when the steam tunnels would shut off, various secret societies, which were left unnamed because I don't really know how legit the story was, but
that's how you know it's completely factual.
And they would go basically underground from one building to another. Yeah, and this one girl on campus decided to investigate and follow them. However, she got into one of the tunnels at the wrong time and was killed, so the steam is her ghost now coming out.
That's how steam works.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other one I remember really vividly, which I've also told Seth, our psychology building on campus has this one office, towards the very top of it. Light never shuts off. And what our tour guides told us is that they've tried everything possible to shut that light off, but to no avail. And the story goes is that particular room used to be the office of a psychologist who had a practice here in Tallahassee and was somehow affiliated with the university, who liked to lobotomize homeless people. And he would lure them in with the promise of stuff like a hot meal and a shower, and then just let them loose afterwards. And our tour guides went on to say that that's part of why we still have a huge problem with homelessness in the city decades afterward.
It has nothing to do with Ronald Reagan.
Oh, and there was another one. You know where Reagan's Hall is, and how there was there's either a giant tree there used to be a giant tree there.
But there's a bunch of old oak trees and stuff in that area.
But in that area, there was a ghost story involving a love triangle in which somebody caught his girlfriend cheating on him with some other dude. They were having sex right under this tree or something like that. And there was death and fingers chopped off, because that's apparently how you handle that sort of situation. Just cut fingers off.
Well, if you're trying to block it.
Yeah. I actually think that's how that happened.
Were there names? No? Definitely true.
I have it on the word of my friend's cousin's neighbor's third aunt that totally happened.
Because it happened to her.
Yes, exactly.
And this took place in the 70s. So it was an oddly recent ghost story.
I mean, the high school that I went to had some ghost stories, but honestly, it's nothing that I can really remember specifically. But I believe there was suicide involved, and because the main building has 3 floors, and there's this one staircase kind of in the middle. It may have at one point been a spiral staircase, and there's a rumor of a ghost that haunts, I think, the 2nd floor, who may have hung herself from the spiral staircase.
Oh, that reminds me. There was another ghost story that just came back to my mind from that tour that is tangentially related to a ghost story that we heard in New Orleans. And the reason why it's tangentially related is because of very different people, but they died under similar circumstances. In in the FSU ghost story, again, it was close to this 24-hour library. It was in one of the dorms of Office Green. So basically what happened is one student decided to go sunbathing on the roof of a building, locked herself out, died from the elements.
Why?
And is haunting the top floor of that building.
Then in New Orleans, very similar, fairly similar, but kind of like the reverse.
Also dying from the elements, but in this case, this poor lady froze to death. And it's also related to what we mentioned earlier about the Code Noir that was in place at the time. Poor unfortunate lady did have some mixed ancestry, and that kind of ties into her story. Basically, she was the longtime mistress of a wealthy French guy, and in New Orleans, they also had their own set of laws for men maintaining their mistresses. Like, they had quite a lot of rights for
They had more rights than legal wives.
Whoa.
Yeah, they had to be supplied with their own residence, for one.
And their kids were recognized. Like, they had all kinds of
well, shit.
benefits. I know. And one day it just got to the point where she really wanted this guy to just, leave his wife and be married to her instead. But on his part, that was not going to happen. And what did he do? Like, what did he say to her that led her to go outside?
He was just apparently getting
Wait, I know the story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You want to finish it up? Or?
Well, okay, what happened was, he said if you take off your clothes and go out on the roof for like 24 hours, then I'll marry you. And she's like, okay, well, I'll fucking do it. And she died.
Yeah.
Yep. They found her frozen, huddled next to the ventilator.
It may not be true, but...
Yeah, it underlines a reality for that period in New Orleans.
I think so too, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's more like emblematic of something that could possibly have happened.
Yeah.
But maybe not necessarily really something that did happen. But it is interesting to know that mistresses had so much protection.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of nice in a certain way, even though probably most of that was not very willing.
Yeah.
So...
And then to, again, shift things back over to Milledgeville, we had our own hanging student urban legend. And the oldest dorm, because all of the dorms built in the last all but one of the dorms from Milledgeville, Georgia College campus, have been built in the last 15 years.
Okay, so they were all real new.
Yeah, except for one that had been there since when it was a women's college from the late 19th century on past the Second World War.
That's kind of similar to FSU's history.
Yeah, FSU was the women's college here in Florida, for those of you in the audience who don't know. So, interesting parallel there.
Yeah, Georgia College is literally the sister school to UGA.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, like we were the sister college to UF, which was the men's school.
One of the favorite stories, especially kids living in that dorm would like to tell, was that in the 50s, there was a young woman attending the school who, for whatever reason, like I heard two versions, one that she had been jilted by a lover, another that basically her whole family had died of a disease to herself.
Right.
In the top floor of that building. And when you went into the room where it happened, on the anniversary of it happening, if you turned on the light, you would see the shadow of the hanging body on the far wall. And
that's very specific.
Yeah, and of course I had at least 3 different people swear up and down that they had seen it personally. Yeah, but of course these were also people who I knew personally to smoke pounds of cannabis, mainly because I helped them do that on several instances. So, if you want to...
What state were they in when they saw these apparitions?
Exactly.
Hard to verify.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, some people say it opens you up to, just seeing things as they are, which apparently includes ghost shadows.
I don't know why, but that story was making me think about when I went out to Colorado and visited with one of my friends. There was this place in the mountains called Gold Mine or something.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like such a Colorado name, but go on.
Right? But it was basically a thing where you go up and there's a tunnel at some point, and what you're supposed to do is you turn off your lights and all that sort of stuff, and then you roll down the windows and you slam your door, and you're supposed to hear footsteps or whatever.
Okay, it kind of sounds like very Bloody Mary.
Yeah, I mean there's kind of a bunch of different traditions like that. I think there's something else in Texas where you turn the car off and the car will roll forward even though it's uphill. And
Oh yeah. There's like one, I forget where it is, but it's at a railroad crossing that if
you're on the tracks, it'll push you off the tracks.
Yep. And like allegedly someone put like baby powder on the back of their car.
It's all handprints.
Yep.
But it's kind of funny because I went up there and did that with my friend when I was out there visiting her, and we heard footsteps and turned around and realized there was this fucking guy who was like walking towards us.
God.
And we're like, Jesus Christ!
Just where you just like slam the doors, put up the windows, turn on the car, and get the fuck out of there.
Goodbye. Yeah,
that reminds me
weirdo
of this one night at FSU where it was close to Halloween and they did a double feature of Scream 4 and the original Scream, and I was
Scream is fucking amazing. That is
it is
one of my favorite movies.
And I was walking back to my dorm, and it was like, I want to say it was like 2:30 in the morning or something ridiculous like that, and I was just walking back from the student cinema, and out of nowhere, this little white Ford Ranger pickup truck starts driving on the road, and I start freaking out. I start running, and these two girls who were walking the same direction as me, who had also just left the movie, started running because I had scared them. I still feel bad about that.
Well, you never know. I mean, you escaped, so it could have been something, but nothing happened, fortunately.
But yeah, it was just really eerie because it was just so dead quiet, and all of us were just minding our business, and truck starts driving and I start running, they start but hey, at least we all made it in one piece, so there's that.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, sometimes even if it was unnecessary, it's better to be safe than sorry.
And at the beginning of the episode we teased Savannah and St. Augustine. I don't have much to say about Savannah, though I have been there too. I just remember that when I took a ghost tour there, it was a lot of the usual themes that pop up with
Civil War,
creepy southern cities, a lot of romances gone wrong, all kinds of fuckery involving affairs and love triangles and unintended pregnancies and just all kinds of stuff going on.
The gambit of human suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's the most famous story that came out of Savannah. The Night in the Garden of Good and Evil was basically that, right? It was a
weird but gay.
Yes.
Yeah. A gay romance that went wrong, and also murder.
And that was also tied into with the apparent glitz and glamour that all these people were living in, and I just thought that that's always been a really weird juxtaposition. They were all evil and horrible people, but my God, have you seen the house? And they had all these fancy parties with all these fancy gowns, and there's a lot of stuff like that. And again, another short story about creepy southern rich people. We went to Torreya State Park. And as soon as I told people at work, most of whom are southern baby boomers, they're like, "Did you see the house? What about the house?" And let me tell you, there was absolutely nothing glamorous about that family story, because out of their 15 children, 13 died in childhood.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but I don't care how wealthy my husband is. It must be horribly oppressive to just basically be a human broodmare just pumping out heirs to the plantation, which is probably why they had the 15 children in the first place. And not to mention that the tour guides there go really in depth into the strict boundaries that were set between men and women. Men and women had different furniture designed for them. Yeah. Guys coming over to visit their girlfriends had to be chaperoned, and there was a set system with a candle. Apparently how much time you had left was determined on the length of the candle. There was just all this stuff going on. I'm I don't see why people harken back to this era.
Yeah, and then
that's when America was great.
Yeah, and then if it was only that, it was it's just a different time. But then it's and then these people owned people.
And what was really awkward is that one of our tour guides was an older black gentleman who'd probably been in that part of the Panhandle for quite some time.
Yeah, he did a great job at making it clear the circumstances of the people in bondage. He did it in a way that really humanized everyone involved. It's he made it clear it's not a great situation, but it's just that these were all human beings.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But still, when you peel back the surface of it, it's really depressing. So that's my rant about the plantation of Torreya State Park. And now, St. Augustine, your
Actually,
favorite city in the world.
I just remembered when you guys were talking about St. Augustine and stuff, and kind of what you were just talking about with like throwing parties. It reminded me, I had this book when I was younger because I've always really been into ghosts, so like people are always buying me like ghost books, so I have like a stack of them. But this one that I don't have anymore, and I don't really know what happened to it, but it was Haunted St. Augustine, and I believe that the cover was red with like white and black, but that doesn't really narrow anything down. But anyway, so Haunted St. Augustine, because this is like, I think, the oldest continuous city in the United
It was the
States.
first settlement by Europeans in the Americas.
Yeah, we were there close to its 500th anniversary, right?
Yeah, but it just happened, I
Yeah.
think. And then New Orleans...
We were there for its 300th.
Yeah, well,
What a coincidence.
Yeah, it will be like, I think, next month.
There was this one story that I always remembered because it really freaked me out. It was about this family that was 2 sisters and a brother. And they were kind of always throwing these like big Gatsby type parties, and they were like real famous around town and all this sort of stuff. And then one day people started realizing that one of the sisters was missing, and the other 2 kind of just played it off like, oh, you know, blah blah blah, she's like visiting so and so or whatever. You know, it was like they just kind of brushed it off. And time went on, and then the other sister went missing.
Oh.
And the brother...
Guess the common denominator there.
Well, that's where it gets even weirder. Because the brother was brushing it off, and then the party stopped for months. And then the cops came to investigate, and they found in one of the bedrooms all 3 of the siblings. The brother, freshly dead. The middle sister, kind of gross, and the last one, the most decomposed.
Oh my God.
Out of the 3. Now, I don't know how true that story is.
Yeah.
But that was in the book, and it always, like, it freaked me out. That's pretty fucking creepy, right?
Yeah, they have no idea.
Why this happened, and obviously these other siblings had something happen to them. Either they got sick and, you know, they just didn't want to talk about it or whatever.
My first visit down to St. Augustine was in my final year of middle school. So this was many years ago. It was the year
Like
after.
30 years ago.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Again, on a ghost tour, there is something about being in an old town at night with a stranger telling you horrific stories that makes you so susceptible to seeing things.
I mean, you're really in that headspace.
Exactly. And one part of the tour, we go by one of the cemeteries in town, one of the oldest ones. And we're being told of the story of a little boy who would swing from a tree. And that on certain nights, you could see him swinging. And for a brief second...
You thought you saw.
Yeah. It was just like blue light kind of going back and forth.
A blue light?
Yes, going back and forth, back and forth. And
That may not have been your imagination.
yeah. Exactly. It's like one of those things that it really puts you into a real skeptical headspace where it's like you're both doubting the possibility, but then doubting whether or not you're seeing what you're seeing. You know, it's like, am I seeing that? You know, you're coming up with reasons why it couldn't be true.
For the most part, our brains really just like, oh, that's what that is, even if it's maybe not what it is. You just like look for the closest possible match.
Yeah, seeing to me is not believing. It's like, because if you see something that could be perfectly mundane, your mind can easily wrap a story around that.
I mean, how many times have you woken up in the middle of the night and seen a weird shadow and it just turned out to be like a jacket hanging over your computer chair or something?
Exactly.
Whenever I accidentally disturb him in the middle of the night, he never knows it's me, and he goes, hello?
Oh, when I am in the shower, I hear the front door open every 2 minutes. I swear to God.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's just like I know that's the front door opening. I stick my head out, and it's like, is someone there, Lauren?
Especially like if you're home alone.
Exactly.
Oh gosh.
I have my own St. Augustine ghost story, though it's not a very conventional ghost story in the sense that it was... Okay, my first visit to St. Augustine ever was for my 4th grade class trip because that year we did our Florida State Notebook. I don't know if it was just a thing that my school did or what.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Nobody has. Nobody in Florida, Georgia, anywhere has heard of the Florida State Notebook except, of course, the poor unfortunate souls that went to school with me and had to do it. And basically what it was this long project that was like, what's Florida's state bird, state flower, state song? We had to compile all this stuff about Florida in a giant notebook, and a culmination of this, like, oh, let's go visit the oldest place in Florida, St. Augustine.
Okay.
And the entire time we were there, my mom was very frazzled, stressed out, and actually physically sick, especially when we went to the oldest general store. Like, she had to step outside. It's like there was something in St. Augustine, especially in the oldest building, that clearly had like the most like lingering human presence or something, because the general store still has all kinds of like really old stuff.
Oh yeah.
That probably needs a hazmat suit if you're gonna look into. It just really affected her. It's like she was kind of haunted by it in a way, and she always had that reaction to really old places and old things. Like, she could never even look at like antique furniture. I have a really strong thing against antique fabric because I think that because it's touched people in some way, shape, or form, because if it's like an old bedspread, if it's on somebody's bed, old clothing especially is the fucking worst to me. Like, it just gives me the absolute like heebie-jeebies. But for her, it was like old anything. Like, I don't know if she could sense something that the rest of us couldn't or whatnot, but it just really got her, especially in St. Augustine, and that always stuck with me. And my second visit ever to St. Augustine was also Steph's second visit to St. Augustine ever, when we went together shortly after we started dating. And I have never felt this like both times I've been there, even during the ghost tour that we took in St. Augustine. But at the same time, I can kind of understand like what my mom was going through. I don't really know how else to explain it. And speaking of my mom, I have another story related to her. My mom, unfortunately, is deceased, and in her bathroom she had an automatic hand soap dispenser.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom was one of those people. And this thing, like clockwork, would go off around 3 o'clock in the morning when I was still awake, like after she had passed.
What the fuck?
I swear to God, I really do.
There's no timer in those things. Like, there's no reason for that to be going off.
And even when eventually all the soap had leaked out, because I never bothered touching it or refilling it, I just kind of, stood back and let it do its thing, it would still go off. You would still hear the noise.
Now, do you know if she would get up around that time at night?
That's what I was wondering.
Use the bathroom?
If that was like a residual kind of...
I don't know, but I like to think she was telling me in a way like, go to fucking sleep already, it's 3 in the morning. And our dog, who I still had for a little while afterwards, like, he didn't notice, he didn't care, but he definitely felt like the absence of something.
Oh, your mom?
So I guess what I'm trying to say is I really do think that people can leave an imprint of themselves in some way, shape, or form, and it can manifest itself in really, really weird ways, like an automatic soap dispenser going off like clockwork at 3 o'clock in the morning.
My parents are big dog owners. And,
yes.
During most of my childhood, we had 7 dogs.
I was about to say, I feel like you guys could have opened your own, like, dachshund rescue.
They kind of have that, just like on a very small scale.
It's like basically not an official business, but like that's basically what they're doing.
Yeah, like their 2 most recently acquired, for lack of a better term, dogs have been dogs that they have rescued. Like, hey, these dogs need a home. We'll take them.
Yep. And then my dad has found several homes for dachshunds over the years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how many do they have right now?
4.
Oh, that's
4
not
right
too
now.
many.
And my mom, she never considered very many of the dogs her dog, except for one. It was a little black and white dachshund that had like an almost chihuahua-shaped head.
Huh. She did look like a chihuahua now that you mention it.
Yep. And she passed away about 1.5 years ago now.
Her name was Bella.
Yeah, Bella.
Aww. She was tiny.
Yeah, very sweet
Always
dog.
wearing a sweater.
Yes.
Aww.
Very sweet dog. And they've recently gotten another dog for my mom specifically. And the dog was not drinking when they first brought her home. And see, Bella had a routine where she would go and stand at the foot of the bed, and that let my dad know it was time for her to drink water. And then we go and get her little water bowl, and she would drink. And one night, like the second night, it's like my mom's gonna worry that she's not drinking water. And Blue, which is one of their other dogs, begins like looking at the door and kind of was the sound he
You know,
makes.
doing the little chuffing.
Yeah, and then he goes and stands right where Bella stands.
Stood.
Bella stood, and it's like, I guess you want water, you know? And he gets it down, and it's like, then he walks away from the water, and then she comes over, the new dog, Brinley, to drink water, and like he goes and lays down by the door.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like where he had been looking, and then went and did that. And that to me was very interesting.
And didn't your parents also hear like some phantom scratching or something?
Yeah, they've claimed to have heard, because she would when she wanted to get into the bedroom, she would kind of scratch at the door.
Like a cat.
Yeah, dachshunds are very cat-like in some ways.
They're small.
Yes, and they claim to hear that scratching every now and then.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe she's still
hanging out.
Yeah.
And when we first met Brinley, the newest member of the family, they couldn't help but point out all the weird parallels between her and Bella.
Yeah, very similar dogs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's like you don't get dogs that are very similar, especially if you're getting them at the pound or something like that. Like, it's hard to find.
This one was, because it was the two before Brinley that were rescues. Because Brinley, it wasn't a puppy mill. It was like a professional breeder, but they decided to get out of the business, and they were finding homes for their
Last batch.
Yeah. Well, this was one of their breeding dogs. Mm-hmm. So she had like several
litters
over the years, and
For one, they're both teeny tiny. They're about the same size. They do have opposite coat colors though, because Bella was black and white, and Brinley has this pretty
fawn
color,
and just
and a lot of the same mannerisms, basically.
Yeah, the way she'll stick her arms out in the same manner, like a little
to, like,
seal.
lay down and, like...
Well, no, like when she's being held, she'll like stick her arms out like a seal. And
Dachshunds are so cute.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are, and they bark all the time. That's what they don't tell you about dachshunds. They bark all the time.
Yeah, my brother-in-law was
Yes.
miserable.
Aww.
And
when we were there, I was like, "Can't you do something to make the dogs shut up?"
I lost my own dachshund 2 years ago, and after she passed on, I would see her out of the corner of my eye. It would be and it would just be like, it wouldn't be sad. It would just be like, well, still with me in a way.
Still hanging out.
Yeah.
I unfortunately got to spend relatively little time with her because she passed not too long after we started dating.
Yeah.
But you know how some people say that their dogs are like people? She was people.
Yeah, she had very human eyes.
And the most dignified dog you've ever met.
Her name was Coco, and we called her the little lady.
Aww. So any other St. Augustine stories?
You said you were going to say something about the ghost tour, right?
Oh yeah, this is a criticism of certain types of ghost tours.
This is the one we went on as a
couple. Ghost tours in which they will have someone come out and scream at you or bang on stuff are the absolute worst. And this one was bad because they made a little 10-year-old boy fucking break down after doing that because they didn't give any sort of warning of like people who
you can't do that.
Yeah, because they took us to an old prison. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's pretty freaky on its own.
Exactly, because there's like mannequins in the cells.
No!
Okay, that really freaked me out.
And I kept thinking it's like...
I blocked it from my mind.
And I kept thinking it's like, there's going to be like someone laying down in here and he's going to like get up or something. I just kept thinking that, and it happened. And he starts like banging, they turn the lights on and off. And
that's okay if you tell people and they're expecting that like somewhere at some point there will be some sort of jump scare. Okay, fine.
Yeah, but like we're not going to tell you when it's going to happen. We're just telling you that it's happened. If that's something that doesn't interest you,
maybe go on to the next one.
Oh, and on the tour I went in Savannah, my really big criticism of that is that at one point there was some bullshit involving a creepy mannequin in a window.
Mannequins are evil.
They are, but this one was like purposely put there like for the purposes of all the ghost tours in town.
It's supposed to be like, oh look, there's a person in the window. Mm-hmm. Now, mannequins are that uncanny valley.
Yes.
They're almost human-like, but not quite enough to be human.
I feel like you should do an episode on that.
The uncanny valley. Oh, yeah. That would be a good
Video
episode.
games are entering into that space hardcore right now.
Because the graphics are getting so much better.
Yep.
They're not just like a couple pixels and that's a face.
Yeah, but you can't put that life in the eyes. There's just something about that.
But I think that would be an interesting one to do an episode on maybe at another time.
Yes. So, dear listener, the takeaways from this episode are the South sucks
Yes.
and mannequins are the devil.
Yes.
The South has some things to offer, especially if you're looking to get creeped out.
Yes.
So, anyway, I think that's pretty much everything. So, we'll sign off.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.